with social issues. So whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's creating platforms for entrepreneurship in terms of SMEs, one of the things we understood better, for example, we built platforms that help most of the countries in the continent to reduce the impact of malaria in society by just improving drug availability. So when we implemented some of the solutions, we improved drug availability from 25%, for example, in Tanzania, to almost over 90% by just digital logistics and supervision and management. So I come from that background. Now I'm going to talk a little bit, we did stuff in agri. I'll talk a little bit about agri-tech. I am not going to spend more time about the technology in the field, because that's easy. You can get a consultant to implement it for you. I'm going to talk about the platforms that we must enable that are going to bring a much more bigger inclusion in the agri sector. Earlier on this morning, there's a panel sitting here. There was a talk about access to finance, access to markets, the fragmentation in the agriculture sector, especially for startups, agriculture, and emerging farmers, if you like. How do you work? How do you make fragmentation not to be the negative? How do you work with the wave, use digitization to bring greater integration and render a fragmented framework or farm structures and render them into the main market as if they are big, but you have got individual ownership. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to touch a little bit about in-farm tech, but that's easy. That's easy. The big part for me is about inclusion, dealing with the issues around access to finance, how we can facilitate the platforms to do this. My topic is going to be transforming agriculture through digitization. Do I just point here? Okay, it was off. All right, perfect. The key thing to understand today, all of us, is that we're in the last decade of the National Development Plan. We can only all lament about what ought to have happened and it did not happen. My view is that we should just put an effort to catch up. There's a lot that's in the development plan that hasn't happened that we can attribute to all sorts of reasons. But I think government, private sector, and civil society should focus on what do we need to do to catch up so that 2030 we're very close to the objectives of the NDP. One of the key things I'm going to talk about is the competitive advantage of nations. Prosperity is not inherited, it is created. So even if you come with no inheritance, you can still create prosperity. It's as long as you work through the combination of resources that are there, including your own energy and intellect. The determinant of competitive advantage of nations, as you would see here, the factor conditions, which is labor, land, infrastructure. So what makes nations competitive? So these conditions must exist. The demand size, the size of the population, the ability of the population to buy or consume. So that's a demand factor. Smaller countries may not have the demand. Some countries may be in a desert, but we have seen how the Middle East actually moved from being a desert where the factor conditions are not great and they start to focus on precision agriculture. So factor conditions means that when you are naturally endowed with certain conditions like arable land and so on, you are in an advantage. But it doesn't mean if that factor you don't have today, you cannot improvise like what the Middle East has done. So I look at the firm structure, competitiveness of industry, availability of related industries, and so on. This is the stuff that's textbook stuff. But if then one starts to look into what we need to do, look at the drivers of agricultural transformation, you know, land, water, labor and skill, access to information, access to markets, access to finance. So we have to make sure that we have the ability to facilitate all these things and make them available to small farmers, smallholder farmer. The challenge with South African economy is about being big. We're all orientated around big. We're all schooled around big system. 5 telcos, 4 banks, 5 retailers, 5 construction companies. All of them big, crowding out the small guys. And all people who are going to school were being schooled around being big. But when you start to work in the African continent, small is resilient. The bigger proportion of businesses in most African countries are mid-sized businesses. It's only emerging now, the transformation where the big conglomerates start to come into the continent, but generally resilience is in what we see as fragmentation. We see fragmentation as negative here because we're schooled that way. So our extension officers in agriculture are looking for big farmers to support, but they struggle to make sure the small farmers, 1 hectare each, can be sustainable. How then do we use technology to look at all these elements for transformation where a single small farmer may not be able to chaperone all those things and deliver them as if they are the big farmer? How do you make a small farmer look big in front of a big retailer by harnessing technology? That's the kind of my thesis today. I'm not going to spend time here. This is an agri-value chain from input supplier, government and financing aspect. Farmer is here, which is on the ground, off-taker, manufacturer, this is FMCG, whether it's Unilever or Lam, Nestle or Tiger Brands, retailer and consumer. How do we make sure that through technology, the small farmer can traverse this value chain and pick the area they want to participate? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm kind of giving you a preview of what I'm talking about, platforms to coordinate all of this, so to speak. If you look at if you do a cloud search on Google for emerging farmers, there's lots of words that come out. Inefficient, markets is an issue, drought, perishable, fragmented, unsecured, quality, disasters, all of that. So these are the things that come out associated with primary production in the continent. So, and this talks to risks that are inherent into the agriculture value chains, especially farm level production. And we're going to talk about how then technology could work onto this thing. Remember, the gentleman from Standard Bank said, you must have a business plan that passes through the credit committee. So which means there has to be a very clear risk mitigation for your business plan to pass. Otherwise, the money is there in the bank, the demand is on this side, but there's a huge risk and there's a communication challenge in there. So how then do we invest in this to create a much more inclusive agriculture, onboarding more and more emerging farmers who may not be highly skilled? There's a main lever to lift rural agriculture. When I talk rural agriculture, I'm talking about smaller farmers, emerging farmers, and so on, and ask for a loan. They ask for an offtake that is there. That's one element of de-risking. Instead of, whereas when you start, you speculate, I'm going to produce, I think I'm going to sell. When there's certainty around offtake, there's already one level of de-risking. Once you de-risk the access to market, that producer of cassava in Nigeria, they produce a lot of cassava root. So is Vuyani truly a 5 tons per hectare producer of cassava? So there's an offtake on the cassava side, but there's uncertainty about the farmer production proficiency because I am untested. So that's the risk move now from market to agriculture production proficiency. And this is where I see technology covering some of these things as risk I'm talking about. So what are the lenders looking for? They're looking for access to markets. What will be the market? So from an export point of view, farmer production profit, what percentage of those are insured from largely these 4 things? And we need to look at how do we de-risk it. The buyers are looking for security of supply. Is Vuyani rocking up with 5,000 heads of cabbage? Is it a one-season wonder? So do I let go of my large farmer who supplies me all the time because he came into the shop? The things that are uncertain about startup farmers, if you like, because small farmers in South Africa, also in the traceability, am I going to be sitting with no supply, if you like? So that's why I talk about security of supply. What are government's interests in this? Of course, they're interested in food security, employment, farmer identity for subsidy. They want to make sure they can identify. When we talk about risks, there's an offtake, you take a big chunk of the risk. And then the lenders begin to say, well, actually, a big chunk of the risk, you remain with this aspect only, less market. You remain with largely disasters and farmer production proficient. When he was, the statement when she was at the UN, we are the first generation with the real possibility to eradicate poverty. She looked at all this. She was looking at capabilities, technology, funding that exists that doesn't flow into agriculture, and the precision agricultural production proficiency, the skills that were not there before in the previous generations. So we are really the first generation with a real possibility. If you look at the factor endowment, the level of intelligence that sits in society today, but we need to harness it the right way. We need to make sure that we can onboard more and more producers using technology to actually make this potential. She was talking about potential of this generation to eradicate poverty, so in the world. So scale economics are against a small-scale farming operations. So they are against you. Market access and security of supply, so you can't supply boxer, you can't be alone on 5,000 demand throughout the season. Are you with me? So you need to understand that there's a form of stitching together of capability, collaboration, and doing something together to actually render as if this was Kuo's farm, who can produce all season. So it's going to be 50 of the Vuyanis who are going to work together to supply Shoprite, to supply government, supply others, so to speak. To actually be able to own all the mechanization. You can't be everything. So, but you can have different skills collectively together. We need to think about how to aggregate small operations to gain scale. How do we stitch them together? And so that they look scalable. I already said, if the supplier says, I need 5,000 heads per month, and your farm land mass doesn't allow you to do that, you can't leave that opportunity. But they can't just buy 5,000 for just 1 month. You need to actually work with others in the same area to say, look, here is an opportunity. We aggregate, we work together, the whole thing about production planning. Now, this is what I talk about aggregation. What do you do when you're fragmented? So I use an example of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 farm to X, for example, small holder. How then do you stitch them together to be able to address this thing? Gain access to inputs at scale so that you buy together, you get bulk discounts, all of that, all the common things, input subsidies, mechanization, you're sharing infrastructure. So a potato harvester is one, it harvests for 50 of us, give or take. Now, markets, government is a key market. This is important because if you look at feeding scheme, I've seen in some of the provinces, is that the conditions that to feed schools from Shoprite or the big retailers, and this is the dilemma we're having. Government should actually be the pull-through fire starter for small guys. If you don't do it, you're not going to have the base to operate, but it's hard work. You can't wake up and do a tender tomorrow and think there's going to be magic wonder, you're going to achieve this. More insight, more work needs to be done to make it work. So I make it as God-given. I've just used the scale. If you look at scale of 0 to 10 from an agricultural risk, I've used the risk 0 to 10. I've said that the black line is unmitigated. I've said the orange one is mitigated with technology. It could be any number, but I'm sure the banks have some scorecards they use for risk mitigation. I look at crop disease. If you score it at, say, 6, it sits here. If you score it at 6, unmitigated, I think once you apply technology based on information, you'll see if you get more information about what's coming, how to deal with disease. If you're a spinach producer, for the first time you see your spinach turning white or yellow, it's got blight, but you don't know how to treat it, knowing at what price point. So that's why we talk about mitigation. So the risk of market pricing moving in the wrong direction. If they say Vuyan improve production proficiency and de-risk. So you would probably move. The only thing I said, probably you can't intervene much, is catastrophic. Is right let me move quickly. This is the crux of the matter. It's a busy slide. I'm saying a digital platform, it aggregates all the farmers from farm A to farm F. So then you've got the tech elements for implementation. Here, the big thing here is the condition monitoring, where you put IoT, the automated farming structure. So if you like, automated vehicles, all of it when you get to that level. But the key thing is production, planning, and scheduling. It's a very key thing, and I haven't seen much of this happening. Put it this way, if you're aggregating 50 or 10 farmers, so you need to schedule them because you understand the demand. Your main market said, I want so many, I use cabbage as an example, so it's a commodity to refer to. I want 10,000 heads of cabbage per month throughout, or 50,000 heads of cabbage per month. So you've got these farmers this side who are producing, who are part of your ecosystem. You need to schedule them when they plant. They can't plant on month one, all of them. Otherwise, they get ripe on the same month, and then you get wastage, and then you cannot supply. So production scheduling, planning and scheduling, you schedule them based on the picking time, the time to pick the readiness of the crop, so to speak, so that you can constantly supply. Remember, I said the buyers want security of supply. So I haven't seen an aggressive play here. This is how we lift the farming. So can access for this blight, please, our retailer. So these issues that we're facing, I haven't seen an aggressive architecture plus on-the-ground execution. This thing, it's not a gimmick of software developers. It's that plus a human engagement. My thesis is here. The big crux of it is say, if we're going to solve and build an inclusive agriculture in the Free State, you do not need to be big, but you need to be able to be integrated with others in a system that is auditable, that actually gives you the advantage collectively as well as individually. That's what I'm saying. So the rest of the stuff is what happens, the software. The main thing is here, what I'm talking about. This is the critical thing. But the rest of the stuff is always there. But precision in scheduling and planning becomes super important. The rest of the stuff, I'm not going to waste time on it. These are on-farm kind of technologies that, 1 hectare, 2 hectares, 3 hectares. A drone spraying of crop may be the most efficient way of doing it. So, there's asset tracking, there's data generation. This becomes important from an intelligence point of view, including market intelligence. So colleagues, this is what I wanted to talk to you about from a tech point of view. I'm trying to make it as less techy as possible. The in-farm kind of technology, I don't want to spend time on it because anyone can implement for you. The key thing is, how do you bring more people onto the net to reduce impairments? We spoke about lending and agriculture by government. It's there, but it's a bloodbath. People just fail because nobody's holding by their hands, both on the primary production side as well as on. If we work with companies that are already moving in this direction, but there has to be an on-the-ground workforce that actually does the onboarding at this level, that does these things, is what we need to be more inclusive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vianney. Oh, is it fine now? Can you hear me? It's fine. Don't be big. Be able to integrate. And we all not going to be big farmers today. We want to do big stuff today, right? But what I got from integrate into a system that works, because then you're able to then move quickly and be competitive. That's one thing that I heard. And there's one other thing, that we are the one generation that has the possibility to eradicate poverty. If ever in history there was a generation that had that one big shot to eradicate poverty, it's us. Don't start big. Be able to integrate. Because most businesses already exist, and we are first generation entrepreneurs, right? But if we're able to integrate, we're able to then partner with people who already exist and we're able to function. So don't say, but I'm small, I'm here. Build something that's able to integrate. And then another thing that I just picked up is that the tech is very important. You have to use tech with purpose. Everyone thinks if I've got an app, I'm running. No, but what's your app doing? What problem are you solving? And before I go back on stages, let's obsess around the problem, not the solution. Because we jump to solution, whom are you solving? And does it give you, not even local, does it give you global competitiveness? Please doing business, just study that one big document. That will give you act local. Is it act local what? Think global. That's it. To succeed, you've got to look at your locality, what you're doing here, but think global. And that's saying, I'm willing to do something that is not in the market to really shift the market by doing something small, but that's able to be integrated. Come up on stage. That's stage again.
Creating technology for purpose. I'm just thinking about, there's a concept in business, it's called nudist Buddhist. Do you guys know that concept? Where you go ahead. I don't know if you know the story of the guys who created the Segway. They created this exceptional piece of technology. Market was not ready for it, right? So I think that's also one of the reasons why when we're creating tech, it has to be tech with a purpose. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for indulging us once again. Our panel, and thank you very much. You touched on something quite interesting. Access to deals with the issues that are sitting in those specific spheres that make it very difficult for entrepreneurs to be able to access that information, access the markets, and of course, and as you were, and the first thing I was told to do before I could choose what to farm was to test the soil. Then I went to Pretoria, I found a company in Pretoria that tests soil. Hey, the price. I was like, no man, come on man. So we want to de-risk, but the price, the cost to small scale farmers.
Yeah, I think it's an important point you're raising because, can you hear me?
Is
Is it okay now? All right. So I think you are raising a very important point on the soil testing side, soil testing labs. Today, we are not seeing a lot of that. So when you want to do soil testing for a small 5-hectare, 3-hectare farmer, it takes months to get the results.
Yes.
And there's no time for this. So we have to find solutions where soil testing can be almost like instant. So I know it's an exact science in terms of the number of samples you take and where you take them. So I think cost aside, I think a lot of that capability for now to do proper market development has to be borne by government to bring a lot more closer as part of the enablement. But overall, if you talk about de-risking, the risk model I'm attempting to paint here is one, if we deal with production proficiency, we look at the soil testing, its own capability, and then the business plan gets validated because over a period of time, there's a certain repository of information. I release results of the same platform this year, next year. By year 4, I've kind of built a signature. The bank just looks at that and say, we know he produces at 5 tons per hectare. So then the proficiency side is not in question. Then I've got the market on the other side. Why would there be no funding? So I think the private sector, there's making sure that soil testing happens instantaneously, and then there's a repository of results. I should not, if I didn't produce in the target yield this month or this year, I shouldn't hide that. It should be my signature, but it's part of development. So all I'm saying is that there's no shortcut. Everybody is doing short, small startups. Government is thinking that by putting money, you're going to solve the issue. You have to do the hard yards. Put the technology, put the people, build an ecosystem. After that, it's going to take you seeing that level of strategic thinking, systems and people, where we know it's almost like a facility that is for the sector to help the small guys climb up the.
In terms of AI, if we were to say we're developing AI for the agricultural space, where would Africa be positioned?
I think it's a very early infancy stage. I think there are a lot of efforts in South Africa. I think put it this way, we are still in the early stage where we need to bring more of this, all of that. It just reflects more and more people to use and leverage. That's a good start. Whilst we should focus on R&D capability, which we should do in many other tech domains, by the way.
All right, I like that. Priyash, I want to quickly just toggle back from Vuyani. We introduced cost as a barrier to adoption of tech, right, in agriculture. What are some of the other barriers? What, in your data that you are seeing, I'm assuming that you're seeing quite a lot of solutions being positioned in front of our agri-entrepreneurs and agri-businesses, but what is stopping them from being able to quickly adopt and move with it?
I think the main thing that's preventing it, and when we talk about technology and things like software and AI and IoT, it's jargon, technology,
Exactly.
tech. And I want to change, it's about, for us, from our view, the data and what you can do with it. So you have this data, so what? Farmers around the world are asking themselves, okay, I have the data, so what? So what's prohibiting us? In one sense, we need a lot of support from a community level. And we're talking about new era, smallholder type of farmers. They have no idea what the technology exists and what's out there today. And while I agree with Vuyani that, from an AI perspective, in an African sense, we look at it from an infancy in terms of productionized deployment.
Okay.
There's skills, there's capability, the technology exists. We ourselves have created AI models for frost prediction and security analysis. It exists, it's operational. But how do we get it out there in a mass sense?
Yes.
So from the farmer side, what's holding them back is the awareness.
Okay.
But you can't just throw the software at the industry and expect it to magically work. You need then that barrier to entry from a commercial point of view is low. And the technology that we envision there's a lot of barriers. And in the country, we talk a lot about the hard barriers, infrastructure,
Yes.
connectivity,
Yes.
internet use, load shedding and stuff like that. We need connectivity. There's a digital world, we need connectivity.
Absolutely.
As part of your funding for your farmers that it is given, is there a line item to say, put Wi-Fi on my farm? Do we see that? We don't see that actually. There's telcos, there's providers who can actually implement this on a wider scale. But those are things, it's kind of mitigation that financiers would love to see.
Absolutely.
Okay, but the business aspect of it sometimes is quite a challenge for her. So who needs to step in to create that awareness to make sure that they can see where the is?
Take that. I think one of the, if you look at some of the countries in Germany, elsewhere, there's what is called technical support. Technical support is a very important thing, not just for agri, for all. So the business coaching is part of the technical support you render, from pre-funding to post-funding.
Yes.
Now, I'm not going to call organizations, but you've got a lot of consultants who work for some of the organizations. They give you vouchers, but the consultant is clueless, has no experience. So a clear, robust technical support framework that actually holds the farmer even pre-purpose, then works with you through all this, and by the time we lend you the money, already we know that you fit and proper because we've given you technical support. Germany does this thing very well. So in South Africa, we're sniffing at it. So it's not robust.
Vuyani, where does the technical support come in? And I just want you to quickly answer that because I want to come to technical support team.
I'm of the view that if I'm a lender and I've got a pipeline of applications, I look at his story is okay. He's a right jockey. So, but I'm not sure about this risk profile.
Yes.
Because I know I'm likely to approve. I need to have the fund, either government or the fund that says, I allocate technical support for a pre-funded pipeline, the qualified one. You qualify the pipeline and say, well, these are the people who are in the zone. You know, in football, you say they are almost like move them from 18 to 12, so you allocate. Those that are in the center line, you may say, well, it's a light touch development. I'm not going to spend too much money, because you can't wait for evidence before you land. Otherwise, where do you get the evidence? So you have to create a protection mechanism for the first-time farmer. Well, we're going to land for the first time. So we're not seeing that kind of infrastructure. And it's easier said than done, but we have no choice. We have to do this thing. But we tend to take shortcuts to implement this thing. Government should be funding that.
I like that. I like that you came with the solution. Because I'm sitting and I'm like, how? With the how is quite important. I want to bring in Caritas into the conversation. Caritas, small-scale farmers, where do they need the efficiency to be able to go to market?
Sheesh, can anybody hear me? Can you hear me? All right, cool. I think, from my experience with Kula, there's a lot of solutions being thrown at farmers, but the reason they don't work or they don't get uptake is because they're not very practical for the farmer, right?
Okay.
If a farmer's immediate problem is market, right, and you're going to give them some, right, and I think the difference with agriculture as a whole is that farmers are very practical on the ground people. These are people who deal with soil and whatever. If you go and tell a farmer that the ChatGPT is amazing, whatever, if it doesn't bring an immediate solution or something very practical to them, you're very unlikely to get uptake because they have real problems and they work with on cutting in South Africa, or these big phrases, but there's very little practical stuff that actually goes, or little understanding of the practical in here. But that doesn't work practically, right?
Okay.
It was like, oh, let's get farmers, supply to ShopRite, supply to whatever. You have a very big farmer who's on 1,000 hectares, and you want that farmer to go into the same market as a farmer on 1 hectare. That farmer is always going to lose on price. It's basic economics. You can give them all the support you want. If you're selling spinach at 1 hectare, but because you're small, economies of scale just does not make sense for you, right? But it sounds sexy. I want to supply to ShopRite, I want to supply to Spar, but it doesn't make sense, and everybody keeps saying this thing, right? And also, if you're supplying to the big retailers, I mean, we supply to some of the fast food chains, those guys don't take a red tomato. They take a champagne red tomato, right? They don't take, your tomato can be good, but if it's too wide and it's outside the burger, they're not going to take it. It needs to fit inside the burger, right? And you think you'll get the same level of consistency in the quality of the product or the same level of color, collecting all of that product from 100 farmers. It's not going to happen, right? So we need to even rethink the market perspective. But if you're selling to the same community that the farmer lives in, for example, or the same township or the same local area, that person doesn't care whether the tomato is champagne red or not. In their head, it's a good tomato or a bad tomato. In their head, there's no, it's too wide or it's too whatever. But everybody comes on the stage and says, oh no, let's supply the retailer, let's supply. Those guys don't play. It has to be a specific shape, a specific tone of color, a specific size, and everybody's just pounding on this, trying to take small guys, put them in the ring with giants. They're always going to get beat up. We need to rethink the markets that they're supplying to in the first place, and let them supply, for example, the communities that they come from. Like commercial farmers can compete with each other, that's okay, because they can, I think Johnny was saying earlier, a commercial farmer can take 3 years of losses. An emerging farmer cannot take 1 month or 1 season of losses. And everybody just goes and says, hey, let's push them in there, let's push them in there. But we should be finding ways for them to supply to markets that make sense for them. And usually that's their local market, If you're selling a chicken to a big retailer, I'm not going to mention any names, you might find they're going to clip to the people like us. They're going to pay you for saying things that sound nice, but they're not working. You have to understand how it works actually ends up doing absolutely nothing for them.
And I think the solution to what you've brings in, which doesn't have this problem, I think, and big retailers, so to speak. But I think the answer is driving both, because you have the large retailers getting deeply involved into the township, establishing presence. And now, effectively, the farmer is going to they become the main channel to market. We have to see how we can ensure participation. And I agree, if you're going to go for famous brands, then you're going to have to do something that's a lot more easy. But you can't do something as very delicate as tomatoes for famous brands that is largely have a massive restaurant channel. But if you go for Boxer is for mass market. Probably they will be more forgiving, and they're expanding very fast. Just one case to make. I chair the board of ECTC, and I think there's a case for OFDC to think this way. I've been saying to my team, the job of a development finance corporation, economic development corporation that we are in the Eastern Cape, is to build infrastructure for businesses to leverage on a lease basis so that you don't put capex in brick and mortar. Now, the key thing about expanding a new, what I call rural retail outlets that are going to actually serve this market without this peculiarity that he's raising becomes important. I think the OFDC, their job is to build infrastructure and put good jockeys in there who are most likely black and emerging, if you like, to actually begin to sell to the community at a community retail level, over and above the spaza shop and selling of the garden, so to speak. So we have to segment the retail market better. So you can't sell to Woolworths, you're not going to sell to famous brands per se, unless it's a commodity that is not peculiar. So I think it's not binary, it's both, but we need to have this deep understanding about what would go through what channel and how to intervene by selling to communities directly. It's spot on.
Yeah, I definitely like that. And I think just to also just wing it back to our conversation, more specifically than Caritas, what tech can we look at that a emerging farmer, small scale farmer can tap into that kind of gives them the upper hand versus this large farmer who can still use conventional laws of supply and demand? What tech is available for them?
Okay, cool. So I think, again, just from an on-the-ground perspective, another mistake we tend to make is that we tend to speak of farmers as one word, or very generally. And South Africa doesn't work like that, right? We work with sort of 5 segments, from C1 to C2, C3, C4 until C5, where C1 is someone with a garden, C2 is somebody who sells, say, less than half of what they plant, C3 sells more than half, C4 is what you'd call a commercial farmer, and C5 is a mega farmer. The reason we always segment them is because one answer for a C3 farmer might not work for a C1 farmer. But the conversations that happen tend to happen about farmers in general, right? As opposed to kind of looking at what the different needs are, I guess, across the board, right? So I think for somebody who's still starting out, I'll talk maybe C1, C2 to C2 type of farmer. I think there, one of the most important thing is access to information, right? So understanding even before you plant, because a lot of farmers plant spinach because spinach, and we've just been planting it, and I'm just going to plant it because we do it like that. And that's not how agriculture works. You need to just work back from the market and say, you have a good understanding of where commodity that's controlled by one entity. So let's say you pick tomatoes, for example. We all know which company moves tomatoes, right? You pick that thing, and then they decide 1 year to flood the market with tomatoes. They're going to take you out of business entirely, right? So almost that access to information becomes important from the starting stage. You say, what am I going to plant in the first place? What is good for this soil? What is good for this climate? That kind of homework for the early guys to say, what am I planting in the first place, right?
Yes.
And then secondly, access to inputs is also very important, right? Because you find farmers struggling with problems that they shouldn't be necessarily struggling with. Like Mbali said earlier on, she's able to do better the next season because she gets a variety that's a whole lot better than the other one. But she needed to get that information. I think information at the C1 to C2 level really, really matters. Access to inputs really, really matters at that C1 to C2 level. So why am I planting technical advice to a 1 hectare person? And the reason for that, it just doesn't make business sense. Because you're going to spend a whole day or half a day with somebody who's going to buy 5 liters of something. whereas you could spend a whole day for that time that you spent there, right? So it means government needs to be intentional about, that's where you need policy to step in, intentional about providing support, puts up, they can say, look, they can take it. We're now able to connect input suppliers, technical service people with a smaller farmer. It doesn't make sense for the guy to drive there and spend the whole day, but he can actually get live technical service, taking pictures or whatever. What we've also done, because again, Africa is very tricky, we've looked at where we have a high density of these sort of small-scale farmers, and we started setting up these cool containers. It's like a sort of a kiosk. So instead of saying, Bayas and Genta, send your guy out for a whole day to see one farmer, go to the Kula kiosk, and then we have Crop Monday, right? For example, in Winterfell, we'll have Crop Monday, and they know somebody from ACI is coming, somebody from wherever is coming, and now it makes sense to send someone out to deal with a group of farmers as opposed to deal with a single farmer. So it's sort of, we're still leveraging the tech to map where the farmers are. We're leveraging tech for the actual purchasing. So I think for C1 to C2, I'd say on the C3 side, that's where your emerging guys, so your guys who can get commercial, almost about to get commercial, those guys need financing, right? And the funny thing is that there's so much money, so much. Open the news, hear a budget, 3 billion, is that the people that the money is intended for that. So there's 500 million set aside for a particular fund, right? And they say it's for emerging black farmers shop. You get there and they say, give me 3 years audited financial statements. This guy has been barely striving to survive, and now you think they're going to spend 200K on audited financials when they're running a loss-making enterprise. You know what I mean? So it's almost the money's there, but the farmers are not in the format that they're deserving of the funds, are not in the format that they, I don't know how to explain it, the format that is required for them to get the funds in the first place. So what we started doing with some of our partners was saying, look, instead of doing all of this ribbon cutting, because you buy a farmer tractor this year, né? 2 years, I guarantee you, if they don't have access to market or whatever, they're going to sell that tractor and they're going to buy something else with it. You know, so it's kind of pointless. So what we started doing is saying to the credit institutions, to the banks, and to the input suppliers, and to the funders, give us the fund, so maybe say $2 million, we use that as security, right? So what do I mean by that? So we say to the bank or the input supplier, give this farmer a credit line, right? But then use this grant money as security in case they default. But then when the farmer pays back, because now because they were not able to get the credit line in the first place, when they pay back, they then begin to build a credit profile, whether it's over a year or over whatever period, and then you automatically unchain that emerging guy. Like we work with emerging farmers who pay $7 million for those guys, it's more of a financing. And then your commercial guys, it's usually like new markets or whatever. But in terms of how we talk about farmers in the first place, you can't be in South Africa and say this is for farmers, because these are 2 different worlds or 3 different worlds that need to be treated differently. And tech needs to have a practical element. It's not Instagram or Facebook. It needs to have a very practical element for farmers to be able to get uptake. And we've got an uptake from
problems that they're encountering. Priyash, social and ethical technological implications, what are they?
So ethically, everyone talks about, POPIA and the compliance and all of that. And I don't want anyone in the agri-industry or farmers or agribusiness to be afraid of this.
Okay.
Right? The responsibility is on all of us, technology providers, platform providers, the farmers, the businesses, and all of that. Right? So there's ethical considerations, Then there's technologies that track, as an example, movement of my equipment, movement of my people, and we have to switch the narrative. It isn't this big brother type of thing from an ethical. There's safety considerations. Narratives as, okay, is this an ethics thing? Do we have to be careful around that? And we do, and we must be responsible. But don't let it overshadow the value that data is going to give you as a farmer, because you are breaking then the potential of your efficiencies. In there. Social challenges, for me, it's all about access and equal access. I've always said agricultural industry has been severely underserved by technology. It's almost like the last industry that you kind of look and where you have strong R&D development. Now, we only said R&D. R&D needs investment. Doesn't have. ChatGPT wasn't created overnight. They had $1 billion from Microsoft. They had donors. it takes a big thinking. So the social responsibility, and remember, social responsibility isn't just for government or social responsibility means it's government, it's private, it's the farmers on the ground, it's your technology providers all coming together. But those, for me, what's lacking is where are those conversations? This is the start of it. And if we piece all of that together and we start talking about the value and how do we get this evidence on the ground, and again, I harp on this, it's about the data and what do we do with it. I love what Khalida said about, there's no one size fits all. It isn't agriculture industry. It's commodity dependent, it's scale of farm dependent. And a practical example from what he said from the social side is, and an actual deployment side of technology, last year we deployed to 20 smallholder farmers in a Groblersdal area, all farming on one side. And technology was a little foreign.
Okay.
Now, the social aspect is, do they even know about this? And then cost becomes the entry easier from a social point of view. So, I'll give you one practical example. Rainfall. We want to measure rainfall. So now you have fancy sensors that you can put on farms to measure rainfall, as an example. We took 8 Rand, I think it's an 8 Rand water level rainfall gauge, those little plastic ones, stuck it in the ground, gave them an application and said, every morning go out and measure this. Just as an example. The barrier to entry for technology is much smaller than we think. So we don't need to be afraid. From social and ethical considerations now, always think from a data perspective.
Yeah.
Is this socially relevant? Is there access for everyone? And now who's having the bigger conversation to say, okay, there's groups of smallholder farmers that we want to then train, we want to educate, and we want to deploy the technology. As smaller farmers to build up this evidence-based history so that the credit providers have it. And then in year 4 and 5, the farmers build up their commercial state so that ethical point of view, that's my views.
I like that because often what we're seeing is that big companies are starting to spin it as responding to, for instance, ESG or impact farming. And Vianney, I want to talk a little bit about big data being big business, right? And the guys that are taking it up are your private equity firms, investment firms, funds that they are running, and they're using, and at the defense of them, I don't want to say isolate the farmer at the end, where the farmer says, you know what, stay away from us, we're farmers, we'll do what you do, and you stay with your technology and your funds.
Yeah, I think the big thing is what he said, that it has to be relevant to the farmer on the ground. As long as there's a pressure to address immediate issues that I'm facing today as a farmer, that's one thing. However, if you're able to create a signature of my performance, both for commercial as well as on the production proficiency, then all of a sudden, that data becomes super important for as part of a credit score. So for lending purposes, then all of a sudden, I'm going to have financiers chasing me for funding, but then, I'm prolific on production. I can serve the markets better because there's insight at that level. So you have an off-take agreement or you've got a good market through retail. And when I say retail, I'm not only talking about the big retailers. We have to create new form of emerging retail channels, so to speak, that are going to be able to enable whose main suppliers are going to be small guys. And then, so there's no fussing around this issue. And that investment is coming. I think any relationship, look, big data is about contribution. Something in, some value equation. In variable, if I give more than I get out of it, I'm going to fall off that kind of relationship, even in the case of the digital platform. So transparency, honesty, working on the value for the farmer is the only thing that's going to keep the ecosystem going. And it becomes bigger and bigger. Benefits must be shared amongst all the ecosystem contributors.
All right, I like that. And big, mega farmers. Now, and I'll bring it to finance because that's the world that I live, financial education. Tax-free savings accounts in South Africa, heavily regulated. They've got a limit so that the people per lifetime limit. Do we need to drown out your C1, C2, C3s?
Sheesh, that's a tough one.
Well, then pose to everybody on the panel, but you can start it off.
I think not necessarily. I think I don't want to run the risk of also vilifying the bigger guys, you know, because I think they play a very significant role for food security. I think even when COVID hit and everyone was rushing to the shelves to stock up, for anyone in agriculture that was silly because we actually export most of what we produce in the country. So they actually play quite a critical role. I don't think we need to necessarily put caps or limit them particularly. I think we need to be more intentional and better about how we're servicing the lower guys. And I think policy has a big role to play in ensuring that we get the support right at the lower end, right? Because it's not going to look the same in Africa like what it looks like in the West in terms of how we solve problems on the smaller end. So, I mean, a good example for that, if you look at the agriculture data points on the continent as a whole, 60% plus of everybody on the continent is a farmer, right? Meaning that they're completely dependent on agriculture to stay alive, right? And if you go to the Eastern Cape or, you know, any rural town, instead of, I guess, capping the top guys, we actually need to be more intentional about how we support the lower guys. And I think policy has a big role to play because agriculture implies land. You know, you cannot be a farmer without a piece of land, and automatically that is policy, right? So it means we need to be very intentional about how we're supporting them, intentional about how we are, like for example, what I was saying, linking, guys, but Uber kind of gave you a business case. They said to you, if you buy a Toyota Corolla on credit and you're paying 6K a month, including insurance, you put it on Uber, it's going to make you 30K. All of a sudden, everybody's excited about the cab industry, right? And I think we need to find ways to do that they can pay. You know, you must not need, tech must come in to bridge that to say, I'm just going to list my stuff on this platform, and I'm good for it, and therefore I'll just meet these buyers on this platform. So I think instead of focusing on how we can cap the bigger guys, and I think even from my experience, the big guys are actually very open to working with the smaller guys, and they usually adopt some of the smaller guys around them. But if policy doesn't come in very well at the lower end, and if we're not intentional about helping those guys, we're going to stay in the same place.
I want to say, take me in confidence of some of those policy, either changes or introductions that you would like to see. You started touching on a land one, and then you retreated.
Yeah, I think naturally land is a key one, right? Because there's no other institution that can help you get land other than government themselves. Land is obviously key. I think the graduation even from, so I'll give you an example, just as we're talking about financiers. We have a lot of farmers in the Northwest, really good farmers. They're performing commercial level, they're doing citrus, these guys are killing it, right? And they're killing it at the level of their, I almost want to say white counterparts, right? But these guys buy their stuff up front, right? They can't get credit from the bank because the bank wants collateral, right? And so they'll give them to grow their businesses in the same way that a traditional commercial guy can be able to use. So the guy has the piece of land, but policy kind of says, here's a lease, sort yourself out, and let's see how far you're going to go. So things like that, I think the big thing that's lacking about agriculture, everybody's talking about it here, but there's a need to kind of go in and kind of sort out some of the real
Issues
the real tree farmers, the price from a local juicer, whereas they could be getting an international price because they don't have a packing facility. You know, policy could come in there to kind of help assist these guys because the quality is there. And then we had to speak with one of the commercial farmers. We got their stuff into his pack house. The stuff went to Bangladesh, China, years. 50 years to get, or 200 years to get where they are today. And the job of policy is to shorten that for this current crop of farmers. To say it shouldn't take you another 100 years to get to the point where you are.
Spot on. I think it's spot on. I think on policy, where even if you do the appropriation with or without compensation, it's the same. It's not going to change. The land hierarchy. Now, there's a mealie field in the family, but then they, by law, that lies barren. Land parcels for agri-production today, even in rural areas, because there's huge settlement demand where people are building houses. Yeah, they will give you a 50 by 50, but it's not enough for somebody to produce something kind of quasi-commercial. So there's a bit of policy there, the land use issue. Give us a small piece, but honestly, so these are some of the hurdles that stand in the way of young startups into the space. I think it's not about the big guys versus the small guys. I'm with him. It's about lifting smart projects. We have joblessness, not just at a national aggregate level, at a local, at a regional level. Now, the way I always look at things is the economics is about that. I spoke about sectors of competitive advantage. It's about not suggesting that deprive Gauteng of jobs if it's a major producer. But if they are exporting maize meal to Eastern Cape, so we're saying let Eastern Cape produce maize meal to create jobs, and then all of a sudden we deal with what more can we do to export. So the jobs issue becomes super important. You can't just be buying things that come from elsewhere when actually you have the land, the labor to produce things, but you may lack the skill. So there's a joblessness construct that is also part of looking at how you build your small guys, and then you can automatically create new retail infrastructure. Their job is to build the infrastructure. They build and lease. It could be leased to buy. So who cares? So that's where the capex of the state should come in to enable, to stimulate economic development. That should be how we are wired. Because if you already have people who are already having a market-ready product, it's easy. You've got a tenant in that back house for years, and then you can give them a lease to own, if you like, structure. But we need to be intentional about these things from both government as well as the lending organizations.
All right, I like that. Thank you very much, Vianney. Any questions that we've got, please? So we've got one there and one by the lady who's wearing a hat. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Caritas, this question is directed to you. I hear you talking about an app. I believe you've created an app. What does your app do, and how does that app assist agriculture? The second question would be, you spoke about a group of people who had land, but it was a lease, so they cannot put it together as a collateral for the bank to fund it. Do we have some sort of real solutions that we can put up today that could help, or maybe that we could look at in order to help the people, the agricultural people that are in the room that would like to collaborate and approach the bank? Yeah, I think those are my two questions. Anyone can answer the second question.
All right.
I think the first thing I wanted to just make a request, if we could get links or channels or where we can follow the panel, the speakers of today, because I think it would be very useful for us to keep the conversations going, because we have 3 days and you know what happens after 3 days. I mean, we might not be contacting you today, this month, but I believe there will come a time for someone sometime in the future. So that would be very beneficial for all of us. And secondly, I also just want, as far as support is concerned for startup and upcoming agriculturists, is very poor. You can go to the Department of Waste Environment, you can go anywhere, they'll just keep sending you to pillar to post. But I also want to give give a shout out to the Department of Agriculture. There is something that they are doing, and I think they are really trying to support upcoming agricultures in Bloemfontein. I don't know if there's other provinces in which they are doing this, but at Charlotte Maclaig, third Wednesday of the month, there are start to what the crop look like, what seeds are, how to start, and all the way to production. So there's a lot of things that we learn in the classes, at the plots, at the farms, as far as poultry, beef industries, and all of that collectively. So I also wanted to say one of the study cases that we had to do was do our own market research, market analysis program vendors, in which they are able to actually get produce from upcoming farmers. They'll even tell you what they are specifically looking for. And also they are sometimes picky. They'll tell you that they don't want a big spinach. They want the small one because, you know, they also have specifications. Also, are you planting, if it's spinach, is it Swiss chard or is it, you know? So they also do have their specifications, but I believe there is support from their side. And lastly, I wanted to say, there is no future. The future is now. And I'm basically basing this statement on what was said earlier about that we are the generation that can potentially eradicate poverty. Now, I run an organization that provides arts and agri in schools. Probe to find out. I wish the government gentleman that was here earlier was still here. I'm wanting to find out because there's also a challenge within the youth because there's so much poverty, there's unemployment, but at the same time, the community is not interested in farming. The youth is not interested in farming. So my question is, how are we making these sexy and attractive to the youth out there? And also in schools, isn't that we have a large chunk of learners that are, you know, we have all these subjects in schools, but why is, I know that agriculture is taken up in higher grade subjects, but why are we not starting it from the foundation levels? That's my biggest question.
All right, thank you very much. That is everybody. All right, so we'll start off with Caritas. Kula, what is Kula? What does it do? And how does it assist in agriculture?
All right, cool. So Kula is an agri-tech startup. It was founded by myself and some of my co-founders. We are a tech business, a bit unique in the sense that we've built a tech ecosystem. So we're not a one platform startup. So we have three components to the business. One is an input marketplace where farmers can buy fertilizer, seed, anything you can think of. We're able to deliver directly to your farm into just under 200 depots across the country that we can deliver to, or to your farm, or to one of the kiosks. So that's the input marketplace. It's open to any farmer to use. We put programs on there, labels. It's a very informative app that you can get on the App Store. You can just search Kula. You'll see Kula inputs will pop up, and you can download it, and you can look at the products that are there. You can buy them. The same every farmer. The reason for that is because truckload of rotten potatoes or are all on the input marketplace, right? So, but unfortunately, because we are retail focused, we do some export or whatever qualities. Because of the data we have from the input marketplace, and because of the data we have from the trader platform, we started getting approached by a lot of developmental institutions, funding institutions, saying, hey, we're looking for farmers to support. Literally, we can go on the back end and say, pipeline. Then they started saying, you know, our efforts are not working. How best can we help the farmers? So we started helping them with strategy. But basically, yeah, the funder dashboard is, we can link a farmer. So I'll give an example. We can link a farmer with a funder without them applying for funding. So just by you meeting the criteria and being with funder through the funder dashboard. So it's an unconventional approach that we've taken, but we believe Africa is unconventional. And quite often in agriculture, when you're trying to solve this problem, you get undone by that problem. You know, so that's why we've taken an integrated ecosystem approach, because we feel that's the best way to kind of solve problems in agriculture. So inputs, markets, and financing. And funny enough, when you put up that of the year, 2019, I think, top 10 social enterprises in the world. We've grown a lot over the past 3 years, and yeah, we've got big hopes. Yeah, you can just Google it, or Google me, you'll see more about Kula online.
All right. I'm assuming also your response on the funding, which you said was consequential, is essentially answering the question on the collateral for banks.
Yeah, I think the way you could deal with the collateral issue is offtake. That's how we're dealing with it. So if the farmer doesn't own the land, what we do is that we'd get them an offtake. So we'd get like a big buyer, we'd give them an offtake, and then we say to the bank, this is our farmer. Here's exactly what Vian was saying. Here's their data profile. we have the contract, and then our input guys come in with the technical. So we're going to make sure this person has the right technical support. We're making sure that they have a contract, and then here is the offtake. Then the banks are actually more open to fund, because then we deal. I think for me, money is sexy. I think money is very sexy. So the only people say, hey, let's make it sexy, make it interesting. I don't think that's what's missing in agriculture. I think if the business case is clear and it's an industry that makes money and people know they're going to make money, that's very sexy. Because if Uber made cabs to be sexy and Airbnb made strangers sleeping in your home to be sexy, it means as long as there's a business case and it makes sense and people can make money, then it's very sexy.
All right. Vianney, I know you want to comment on it, and I just want to throw the question also on the educational part. I think she mentioned something about should we not be starting at the former years, of our students to teach them agriculture? And then, Priyash, for you, I want to
Yeah, spot on. I think it should start early, because if I look at what the future of work looks like, I think more and more people are going to find livelihood in agriculture. So even with automation, robotics being applied there will still be a huge element of the human effort. So to look at this thing, even if it's just at a supervisory level, decision support and so on. So agriculture is tiny today in South Africa, which means there's a huge opportunity to drive up the contribution and still get more and more people involved. So we should be pushing a lot of it at the early stage so that people grow up natively into the agri sector. It's unlike before, where you grew up in subsistence agriculture. It's and more young people. They say, well, we know we're not going to be employed. I'm a graduate. Is there anything I want to start up something in agriculture? Especially girls. That's what I see, more of that. I think it's a small subsector, but there's a lot more interest coming through. Others, they produce pumpkins that you see in Spar. So it's a very different, so they don't sell the big amagakas, the heads of pumpkins. They process them. So that's what I'm starting to see. But then you need to hold those people to be consistent and then start to do things. So I think there's potential for uptake. I think we need to scale it by going to the foundational phase.
Are there any parents in here? Roblox. You guys know Roblox? The game that the kids play? That's what we need. We definitely to be integrated with farming. Priyash, to close off our session, I hear with our tap, use that as the leverage to bring them into agriculture.
100%. I think this whole sexiness conversation needs to be had in a bigger space.
Okay.
We're talking about technology and data, and what we've seen, the established agricultural apps and technologies out there, why do they look gray, and why do they look like an Excel spreadsheet, and why do they look like this administrative headache that I'm pick up? Why? The sexiness media worked globally. Why are we stuck to that? Why have they achieved stickiness with that type of technology? It's a pleasure to use it, right? There's a FOMO element, like I want to use it and who's using what and stuff like that. But we need to, I need to log my planting and my harvesting schedule, and I need to go back to the office and fill into the spreadsheet, and no, they like it. They're like, oh, check what I'm doing. That can become viral.
Yeah.
And so that element, that social-like element of the technology must not be ignored. When we built Hydra, we built it sexy as hell.
I like
that thing looks hot. But there's a reason for it. The colors are thought about. The icons are thought about. If there's a feed like a social aspect, it's the same for it. We must have that same AI. Take the selfie with the technology. Let that sort of scatter out.
I like that. I like that approach. I actually am so excited. So I do think there is quite a great incentive to make technology or farming take rather more attractive to the youth. Maybe next year, Lerato and KK, next year we bring in a bus of matriculants to this specific session, right? And you guys show us how to make it. Absolutely, I think that would be absolutely wonderful. But there was a last question about channels of communication.
Yeah, if you connect with me, and then I read a lot of the messages, I respond to them. If a day doesn't go without me looking into LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So if you want to get in touch with me, LinkedIn, and then if you want to take a conversation, we'll share the details at that point. So generally, if you want to engage, LinkedIn is a good platform for me. And then if you want to go deeper, then we can exchange details at that level, and that's fine.
In fact, they say LinkedIn is the new Instagram. So
What else? Twitter, just my work or cooler related. If you go on the website, there's a little chat bubble on the website. If you send a message right now, someone will respond and help you if it's business related. But if you want to talk to me directly, LinkedIn or Twitter. But if it's agriculture related and you need immediate help or something urgent on the website, there's always someone ready to respond to you on the other side.
perfect. And Priyash?
Cool. So ours is easy. The Awareness Company, awarenesscompany.coza. You'll find all our socials. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And for myself, it's Priyash, P-R-I-A-S-H. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so you'll find me on LinkedIn, and follow me on Twitter for all my updates and so forth. Very happy to engage.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we please give my esteemed panelists a round of applause? Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Can you take these off?
It's funny.
Sure, that was good.
That was amazing. Sure.
You know, there's information overload and there's proper insights that you get for you to do what you need to do, right? And you always go to sessions and you get the information overload. But this one is
Yes.
just proper insights. What must people take away with?
And I think you reiterated it right after the panel is start, right? Start, but also most importantly, your network is your net worth. I often challenge that notion because I think it's unfair, you know? But I think today they backed it up. And they backed it up by saying, large-scale farmers are open. Let's have the conversation. And I think if you're going to learn from anybody, it is learning from somebody who's already walked the path, right?
Correct.
And then you've got to obviously craft as you're going. And I think that's one thing. For instance, during the break, I literally clung on to Mbali's. If she was wearing a skirt, I probably was holding on to it. Just trying to understand. I said to Mbali, you know, sometimes when we look at people like you, we think it's so far-fetched what you are doing and what you've been able to do. Because Mbali explained, city girl, and she just started farming. She doesn't even come from the farm. I mean, Nakajwa Bushi. I should be able to farm,
Yeah.
but I don't. And I don't know where to start. And I think today they gave us that practical way in which you can start and where to find those resources.
So I believe in value chain.
Yes.
Gets harvested. There's the pack out that will be on time. Some of us maybe are well. I heard some guys don't have pack outs. Maybe you have the ability to build one in that value chain of agri. Not everybody can be a farmer, but everybody can then participate in that space, right? We agree. So that's what I heard. And then this part that for me always baffles me, and just maybe it's here, access to funds.
You know, it's very interesting. So I studied communications and advertising. That was my first kind of degree, right? And then I went into the space of financial education, and I always wanted to go into property. Didn't have the funds to go into property. So one of the things that we did with my team is we said, how can we take what I have studied, what they've studied, I mean, we're a group of creatives, and create a cash cow out of it to tap into a market where we can't afford to buy brick and mortar. So what did we do? We went and looked for properties that existed that we could turn into advertising spaces. It's what we knew.
Yeah.
We know advertising. So we went into Kokasi. We identified those properties that were very close to the main routes where there's going to be people. We turned them into wall murals. We used that to fund our brick and mortar. So I often say, you know, access to market sometimes it's about really thinking out of the box. It's about saying, how do I create that funnel that's going to eventually get me there? But there's several things that I need to get out of the way. So we needed the cash. We needed that to be able to position ourselves.
Sure.
to where we could use our first property as collateral now to the next property. So I think sometimes it's about thinking out of the box. And as an entrepreneur, you have to think like that.
Then I want to get to a point where again, maybe, and not even maybe, I'm going to be controversial. You would pay 1,000 rands to sit next to the premier. Correct? At a dinner. Shift the narrative. Be the friends of the bank. Gone are the days when you have to appease politicians every single day and be in a dinner where you are near a high-ranking politician because you think a tender will fall on your lap. Start investing in knowing the bank. Because I think that is the first level of conversation and engagement that you need to have to kill that wall or barrier. A bank was opened 20 odd years ago, and the only thing that they did was to kill the glass between the consultant and the customer. And that became one of the biggest low-income banks in South Africa. Just by one thing, understanding that glass brings a barrier between the consumer and the bank. How do you break your business barrier between yourself and the bank to be known by the bank manager, by the bank consultant? Because my view, honestly, and it's my personal view, banks, if they know who you are, they're able to understand your application better.
Can I add something to that? And I think we would be amiss not to reiterate this point. And I think it was made both by Umbali and then Vuyani also kind of came and brought it to light. At the end of the day, and Dani also mentioned, banks are profit-making companies, right? And we can't run away from that. And you can eventually get a fruitful answer. But I think Vuyani said something, de-risking. I think it's important for us as entrepreneurs to understand where a pain point of a bank is.
Correct.
I think it's important for us. I mean, the answer Mbali gave, or the addition she made to the response about they're willing to fund GTIs, but they're not willing to fund businesses. But maybe sometimes we have to ask why. What do we need to do? My mother always says, use the systems of the bank, use the bank accounts, so that when they say, where's your record keeping? Hi, but I'm here.
It's here.
Where's your revenue? Hey, but I'm here. Often we say to our mothers who work, go magaeng, who sell things, yeah, but when they go and look for funding, for student funding, whatever, for their kids, and the bank says, but how do you prove to us that your business is actually profitable? And they can't, because they don't do record keeping of those things. Mbali says, yes, one, it's de-risking. It's a form of de-risking.
Evidence. I'm going to give, you don't have to do something sexy, right?
Yeah.
A friend of mine during COVID took his garage in an estate, a well-established estate in Johannesburg, put 40 chickens in there. Small, what do you call day one day chicken. I think after 2-3 weeks, they become sellable. They were not to be run, because he took them, cleaned them up, sold them to people, normal neighbors, at about 120 rand a chicken. I think he bought them for 15 rand or something. This guy today owns 4 chicken houses from COVID to now. He not even get money. He began by buying, if not 10,000. Start small, start easy, be focused, and get it done. It's not easy. I mean, this guy was every day dirty with his chickens, and I was making good money. Back to my story. If you go to a vendor, Toyando, you pass the marketplace. I think it's, I forget the name now. Chukuma Market, it is. Mm-hmm. Those mothers there save 300 rand a day towards school fees or varsity fees for their kids, and they club into a Stockfell. Mm-hmm. Collectively, in a year, in a month, they are able to take 108 students to ECT. And it costs how much to go to ECT? 120,000? So you do the maths, how much they save.
Sure.
The bank gets to see the money.
Yeah.
I think it's in the millions in a year.
Yeah.
And even when they can't afford fees for next year, but the track record in the bank is able to have the bank provide them a facility whilst they're waiting for the money to come in. if the bank can see you and you are surfaced, you're able to negotiate. So, back to your...
The 5 processes of businesses are still important. Right, market. There needs to be a market. Nowhere in. Say to my higher price, as long as you deliver it on the day that you promise to deliver it on. And probably the last one is finance. Are you profitable? Are you going to be profitable? Because you can run a business as a crusader and really believe in it, and we all talk about social enterprises. And
There were strikes, pass. That's when I get you to score.
I can see.
So I'm giving the honors to you to
Okay.
give us the winner today.
Yo, Luhena. Sure.
I'm Eddie, and I'm known for these things. Today is only the beginning. So if tomorrow I'm seeing a full pack, I'm going to hand out even more stuff. This is just the beginning of many things. So let's today give this one. Tomorrow, if you hear, when you hear tomorrow, there will be 3 or... But let me just keep quiet. Let's just give...
I feel like I must pass this one on. Panelists, help me out. Let's deliberate. I'm going to come closer so we can deliberate
Thank
on
you.
this. Let's deliberate.
Me, I'll keep on looking at the gift and thinking of tomorrow. Our sponsors are Jeep. I'm not saying anything. Our sponsors are Vodacom. I'm not saying anything.
Right. Audited by Mkholokolo Auditors. I think I may have a winner. Now the winner is based on engagement, attention, participation in both panels. And the question that was asked by the winner, especially in the last panel, I think has everybody thinking. Even as you're sitting right now, you're probably still thinking about that question. What we really liked about the way the question was also positioned is that it came with context, right? So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. Drum roll, please. Here's the problem. Here's the problem with the drum roll. I can't remember her name. It's the lady who asked about education in the formative years. Yes, girl. Yes, girl. You gotta do the walk, girl. Yay. Oh. Yes. You wanna say thank you to your... I wanna give you my mic. I wanna give you a moment. I wanna give you your moment. How do we do this? The other way, this side.
OMG, OMG.
Okay, here's one.
Thank you. OMG, OMG. I'm just gonna say thank you. Right now, I ain't got much to say, except I was just clearing my table, just making sure the space is there. Thank you. Thank you, Gatabo. I think, okay, in closing, I just want to say, Gatabo Media, thank you so much for bringing us this wondrous opportunity. I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I'm going to be with the children. My babies are doing auditions. It's every school thing that we're doing. But Friday, I'm going to be doing best to be here. I think I want all of Bloemfontein to be here.
Absolutely.
So I'm definitely going to be making that noise. Donkey shoot.
Come, Nicholas, come.
Oh my gosh, can I hold it?
Yes. Thanks a lot. So, 2 last times when you're out to network and have a good time. So, I'm hoping that tomorrow we'll be seeing more people. Today was a very engaging day, great insights. Besides the gifts of tomorrow, that will be more. Tomorrow's going to be also a very dynamic day. So let's make it work. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you for taking time to be here with us. Thank you for your insights, and I think it will take us one step forward towards where we want to be. And as for me, for the coffee that's there, we really appreciate it, and for you being here as a sponsor. Vodacom for the Wi-Fi, it was good. We were surfing, and I'm sure you were happy with the Wi-Fi. Motors Jeep, For the speakers, traveled smoothly. We're waiting for the new Jeep. Keka, we want the new Jeep. The arrival, yes? Or are you? Okay. I thought we were putting a Jeep for tomorrow for prizes. Okay, no. Okay.
There's actually a special that Motors Group has put together. So for those that have attended, and obviously for the next 2 days, if you attend this session, there's a Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's a 7-seater. We actually got one parked outside. It's a 7-seater. It goes for 1.7 million rand. 250,000 rand discount on that vehicle. So for those that are interested and those that are looking to upgrade their vehicles, it's outside, 1.7 million rand car. They give you 250,000 rand discount.
And it's free to test drive.
And it's free to test drive.
With a license.
And we've got the insurance guy here. We've got the banking people here, so you can just get in touch with them.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And lastly, Cola Beverages SA for their part here. And we continue to thank them for future engagement and businesses that we'll have with them. But lastly, before everyone goes, I would like the speakers to please don't go, just to take a picture as a group so that we can have some data and memory. Instagram.